Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's video. My name is David and the title of this video is Your Fear Has a Voice, and today we're going to talk about who in us is actually afraid when we're feeling anxious. Some people spend a lot of time fighting their anxiety, battling with it, ignoring it, trying to reason your way out of it. And so what if anxiety isn't your enemy but is protecting you? And what if the reason for it not going away is that you never actually listened to what it had to say and what those who had something to say needed? In the first video, we talked about how avoidance feels good in the short term, but keeps you stuck in the long term. How confronting your fear can pave the path to a corrective learning experience, and how acceptance is the bridge between the two of them. In the second video, we talked about Carl Jung and the hero myth, and we learned that anxiety might really point to a situation where something we would actually need to learn in order to overcome what we're dealing with lies. And in the third video, we talked about Viktor Frankl, who showed us the importance of a good why for going through our suffering, and who showed us that the reason we confront our anxiety isn't because we're courageous and we have a lot of willpower, but because of the meaning that we bring with, because of why we do it. And so one question that remains unanswered is, who actually is feeling the anxiety when I feel anxious? Because here's the point. When we are anxious, we rarely decide that we want to be anxious. It's more like something happens to us. Something else is taking over. We're getting racing thoughts, emotional waves before, our thinking can catch up. We lose our mental clarity and feel like disoriented. So it isn't something we choose, it's more like something takes over. And so the question maybe is not, how do I stop it? But better, who's saying this and what do they need? So this is where the concept of internal family systems, so that's an idea that was originally developed by Richard Schwartz, and I like to call it the psychological immune system, but more to that in a second. So this is where this concept of the internal family system comes in. And the core idea is pretty simple, I think, but sharp. And that is that we and ourselves, we're not one unified self. We consist of multiple parts. And these parts, they work together like a system. And that system is what Schwartz calls the internal family systems, and what I like to call the psychological immune system. Because the way these parts work together functions like an immune system. It's constantly watching, adjusting, protecting, right? In the end, it's protecting us against multiple things that we encounter in our lives, but it's, and yes, so that's why I like to call it the psychological immune system. And so this psychological immune system, this internal family system, it doesn't do that because we're broken or weak or something's wrong with us, but because that's the way our psyche works in this regard. And so let's get into different parts that Schwartz defined as the internal family system. Okay, so first we have what's called the exiles. Exiles are parts that hold our pain, whether that is, loneliness, feeling hurt, feeling to be too much, or feeling to be not enough. Painful feelings, and exiles, they hold this pain. And in this way of thinking, exiles are suppressed. They're pushed down, way down, where nobody hears them, and where feeling their pain doesn't really come up to us anymore, so that we can attend to the things that we need to attend to have our daily life running. And yeah, exiles and their pain, their suffering, they can stay where they are. And then we have the managers. Typical managers are self-criticism or perfectionism, and managers, they manage. And they manage the exiles. So what they do is self-criticism or perfectionism, they would be ways in which the managers, parts that want to make sure that the exiles stay where they are, they want to make sure that they stay where they are so that they don't come up. And they use different things like self-criticism or perfectionism, right, to succeed in their goals. And then you have firefighters. And firefighters come out when the exiles do actually come out. So when they do rise up, when they're activated, when you feel that pain, then the firefighters come up. And firefighters, there are all types and ways we can cope. So that would be all types of numbing, right? Our gaming, to go out and buy stuff excessively, drug consumption, dissociation, or even avoidance, right? Avoidance itself is a regulatory strategy a firefighter would use to have the exile, if it's anxiety, back off. If we avoid what the exiles are concerned about, if we avoid what would trigger this old pain, we're safe. And the rule always is, keep me safe, like from this type of pain that I experienced. Make sure I don't have to experience this again. What I can do is, or what my psychological immune system can do is, to take this pain away from me and put it somewhere I don't feel it, to have these managers try and like proactively influence things that I do so that I minimize the risk of actually activating these exiles. And I have firefighters, things that I can use if, you know, let's say the worst case arises and the exiles come up, we feel this pain that we don't want to feel. And so we do all these things we know that aren't good for us. And sometimes this even happens automatically. This is basically the message of the IFS. Like, it's not that you choose this, but there are parts of you that do this for you. And here's what matters most. Like, none of this is because you're weak or incapable or incompetent. You know, the exiles, they hold, these parts are created at a time where what you experienced, you couldn't understand. Like a 5-year-old's terror or a teenager's shame. It's like you don't yet get to understand what you would need to do in order to cope with this. And so, because there's no one doing it for you, these parts are created and they take over until you're ready, like until you're grown up and old enough to take care of those parts yourself. In the end, these parts, they serve you. They have a function, they have a job, and their job is to protect you and to make sure you don't run into this type of experience again because it was so painful. So it means that, you know, you're not self-criticizing because you have bad intentions towards yourself, but because at some point in your life, it was more valuable for you, more beneficial to criticize yourself before anyone else could. And similarly with your avoidance, like you're not avoiding because you're weak, you're avoiding perhaps because at a time in your life, what you were avoiding was genuinely overwhelming. And that's that. These parts are servants. They serve you relentlessly, constantly, sometimes painfully, but they serve you. Okay, now I want to tell you about a forest. So in 1986, the Chernobyl disaster, I think most of you know about this. So reactor 4 of this Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, and like massive amounts of radioactive radiation went into like the surrounding atmosphere. There's a forest surrounding this nuclear plant, and like a patch of this forest, like they were green, or yeah, like a green pine trees. So, and about 10 square kilometers of forest absorbed the most of the amount of the radioactive radiation, and as a consequence, their leaves turned like a reddish brown color. It's really a sight to see, the Red Forest. It became known eventually as the Red Forest. And it's a sight to see, true, but also, you know, these trees died. So they absorbed these massive amounts of radiation, and as a consequence, they died. The liquidators, the cleanup crew, they knew, so these trees were a hazard because they were containing all these radiation, and if they would, you know, catch on fire, if they were to burn, the radiation would again get into the atmosphere. So what they did was they cut all the trees down, and they buried them in a couple of meters deep trenches, filled them up with sand and soil, planted new seedlings. Here's what's interesting about it. Scientists figured out that the trees, they didn't decay like normal trees. Like 15, 20 years later, they were still intact, still giving out this radioactive radiation, still influencing groundwater and the ground around it, and everything that grew above. And this is what happens to exiled parts. Just like these trees, they're buried deep down, but they don't change, they don't transform. They stay there unchanged, frozen in time, at the age and the intensity of when that initial hurt, the initial pain was experienced. I said it before, like a child's terror, a teenager's shame, all that still intact years later. Still radiating through everything above them, influencing everything. But, and that's the more important part, today, on this soil that was above these trees, new plants grew. Grasses and bushes and plants and trees. Wildlife's come back. I suppose Chernobyl is one of the most unexpected wildlife preserves we have. Not because there's no more radiation, but because this region has gotten enough time and enough safety so that life could come back. And I suppose this is the promise, more or less, of the IFS. It isn't that you dig up old trees and you paint them green again, but that if you stop running from the pain and that you listen to those parts and what they need, that you can turn it around and you make it so that new things can grow on the same burned ground. So how does it work? I think really it's simpler than it sounds, but you tend to your parts. And you don't do it one time, you don't do it only in crisis. You do it like a parent would check on their children who have been sitting in a dark room for like 3 years. You regularly come and you check. You find the managers, the perfectionists, the self-critics, the controller, and instead of fighting them, you thank them for the hard work that they did, protecting you from having those exiles erupt and making your day-to-day business unable to be attended to. You find the firefighters, the protectors, the numbing, the gaming, the drugs, the avoidance, and you thank them. You don't judge them for it. You thank them for putting in this hard effort to keep you safe. Again, to not have these exiles put more chaos into your life than they necessarily had to leave there. And then you finally tend to the exiles. And you tend to the exile in a parental role. You can be today who you needed to have back then but didn't get. So like, you tend to those exiles and you build up a trusting relationship with them, that you can hold their pain, that you can listen to what they have to say, that you can offer space for them, that they're safe with you, that they always have a space with you. And you integrate those exiles. You get into a relationship with them. And you don't do it once, you don't do it like when you need it. You do it regular, like you would in a real relationship with anyone else. Like you check on people. And like that, you check on you, like your inner parts. Those who were neglected, those who got hurt, and those who got like left out. And this is like the radical claim of IFS. I said it before, like you can be the person today that you needed back then but didn't have. And I suppose one way or another, that's a very empowering message. Like you don't need anyone else to give you this feeling. You yourself can today go and give you what, or give those parts of you, better said, what you needed back then but didn't get. Yeah. And once again, I suppose I'll just explain it one more time. The fact that you are avoiding these things, that you have anxiety, is not a weakness, right? It doesn't relate to competency or whatever. These parts are there. These parts are there because at the time when this happened to you, you didn't have the basis to understand and to deal with what was happening to you. And so your parts were built. Parts that could hold out the pain and not interfere too much with your day-to-day business. Parts that made sure, you know, that everything was in place. And parts that made sure that if things weren't in place and the thing erupted, we had things to do that took our mind off the pain. But today you can be that person. Today you can take that part of you and you can tell him or her, like, you can have a relationship with those parts and you can give them what they need. And so what is the self that Schwartz is talking about? So you know about the different parts of you. And the idea is that these parts, in relation to how activated they are, they take up space in yourself. So sometimes you're only the exile, or only the manager, or only the firefighter. But these are only our parts, right? And when you do what we just said, and you have this relationship to your exiles, you integrate them, you get the managers to back off and the firefighters to leave you alone because they trust you now. The firefighters have no more job to do because there's no more fires to extinguish. Managers ain't got nothing to manage anymore. And because what they had to manage is now in your responsibility and it's taken care of. And then what emerges is the self. It isn't an attitude, it isn't a role, it's not a technique. It is what has always been there before. It is the most natural you, let's say. It is the you that is there if it's not, influenced by any of its parts, right? And so you know you're in the self if you're curious, if you're creative, if you're calm, okay, if you're courageous, confident, and compassionate, okay? These are the C's. So it's a state you're in, but you feel it. Something that you reach when you have this relationship with your parts and they don't need to actively interfere or influence anymore. And as I said, this is a practice. It's not a one-time thing. It's something you do on a regular basis. Like with any other real relationship, you check on people, you listen to them, and you're there for them. So the first 3 videos asked, what are anxieties trying to tell us, where it points us, and what gives us the strength to go through with it. And this video asks a question that's a little quieter. And that would be, who inside of you needs to be heard before you can start to move? So maybe the part in you that's anxious isn't blocking your path, but standing guard, waiting for you to turn around and look and say, I see you, thank you, and I'm ready to take it from here. And this is what I'm going to leave you with. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm happy to see you next week again. Take good care of you and have a good week.